Hey, this is Professor Homo. Welcome to csc230. We're going to be working with some CSS in the W3 Schools sandbox. So we'll just play around, just a little bit of a quick exercise just to get familiar with some of the CSS properties. And what I'm going to do to get you started is under Documents and Resources in e-learning, you're going to be able to scroll down. There's going to be a little section called Links and then Code in parentheses. And it's just a link. If you click on here, it'll just be a link to W3 Schools. So you're going to click on that. It'll open up the Triad Editor from W3 Schools, one that I was working on. Now, you'll first see opening code here, so you're going to have to run it, and it even says to run it there. So if you just run it, and you'll see this kind of looks like that very first one that we worked with. And it sort of is. It has the light blue background. It has the H1 tag. Just to take a look at the HTML that's here, there's not much here. The H1 is my first CSS example. The paragraph is CList below. That's the paragraph. And then we have an OL, that's an ordered list. You did that on your EX4 that you were working on. And it's an OL, remember that means ordered list, that's why it has numbers. And if you look inside the OL tags, you can see there's the LI tags. Those are the line items or list items, however you want to refer to them. And there's 4 of them. There's 4 numbered items. There's red, green, blue, and then I put an alpha, just like RGBA when you use the RGBA color system. I also put a light red in here. It's almost like a little sub kind of listing under here. And I just did that. It's not actually a list, and it's actually not a bullet list. I just put a bullet symbol, which is ampersand BULL semicolon, and then a space, and then it just says light red. And that's all that's there. And it's on the next line because there's a line break. You can see the BR tag there. That breaks it to a next line. Because if it was its own line item, just like if you work in Word, when you hit return, it makes a new number. But if you hit a line break, it just breaks the line. That's kind of what that is. I just wanted to try it out a little bit just to see what happens when we start kind of adjusting the padding and the margins a little bit. That's what we're going to do here, is just kind of look at some of the CSS properties just to get an overall view of what's going to be happening when we start working on our document. So we're still going to be working internal styles, and that's the only way to do it when we work with W3 Schools. We're going to have to use the style tags inside there, and we might even do that when we start our first exercise. But you can see what we have here. We have a body. The body is targeted, and it's making the background color light blue, and it's just a generic light blue. The H1 is targeted, and it makes it white, and it's centered. And notice here that there's P, OL. That means you can target 2 separate elements. All the paragraphs and all the ordered list, which is only one of them, are basically targeted, so they have font family Verdana, and they also have font size 20 pixels. So they're a little bit, and that's the one that they had there by default. So we made it a little bit bigger here, and that's what you're seeing here. Notice this is in the default Times New Roman. This is showing up in the Verdana font. And then we have some kind of empty declarations here where we don't have anything in yet, and we're going to just play around with that a little bit just to get familiar with some of the CSS properties a little bit more before we work on our own document. Now, one thing I just want to point out up here, I mentioned this before, there's a little default margin that goes around your page, that goes around the body. And it's hard to see that unless you do this. And I'm going to put another selector here, and I'm just going to put one for HTML. And whenever I start this, I put my HTML and I put my opening and closing curly braces, and then I tab in one, and I'm just going to put background color. And rather than retype it, I'll just copy the previous one or the one after it, and I'll paste that, and I'll just make it white, and I could type the word white, or if you were using your hex code, you would put the #FFF, and I'll just run it, and you can see what that does. Now the reason I did that, just so you could see that body has basically a default margin around it. Remember, margin goes around the outside. There's no padding on the inside. Matter of fact, some of the fonts go right to the characters go right to the edge of that area of body. So that's the default, and it's about 8 pixels. And how would you know that? Well, if you went to body and you put margin, and remember, if you just put one property, it's going to do it for all 4 sides. So I'm just going to put margin, and if I did 0, and you could just put 0, but I'll put 0px and I put a semicolon, and I run it, you can see what happens. It goes to the edge here. So it wipes that out. So you know that there is a default there. Now, you don't know how much it is. If you put in 4 and you ran it, it's a little bit, and if you put in 8, that's actually what it is. It's really hard to tell. You could probably just look this stuff up, but there, it's back to normal now. So even if I cut it, if I took this and I cut it and I ran it, it doesn't really change. So I'll put that back in there, and maybe I'll just take it off right now So I just want you to see what happens by some of these defaults, because when we work with CSS, you want to be aware of what the defaults are. And you might be saying, well, when I did it 0, how come there's still space up there? That should go all around. Well, that space is actually because of the H1. If I went to the H1 and I put a margin 0 on that one, I'll put 0px on that, and I ran it, that would wipe it out. That's actually kind of a default spacing that goes with the H1 tag. A lot of these things like paragraphs and ordered lists, they have default kind of a space before, space after kind of setup that you're not even aware of, that it just does it automatically with HTML, and we're going to override a lot of that. So, and sometimes we'll even wipe it all out. But for now, I just want you to be aware of some of these things, that there is a default 8 pixel on the body, and there's even default on some of these block elements like the H1s and like paragraphs and things like that. So I'll leave it like that for now. I'll just leave that on, take away the margin of the H1, I'll take away the margin of the page. And what I want to point out right now is the list. Because the list is kind of a little more complicated. You can see it's actually indented a little bit, and then it's actually, indented again, just like if you do a list in Word, and you would have kind of, in Word it would be the margin, and then then you would almost have like a hanging indent that would actually create that for a list in Word. Now we don't have that here, and we're just going to explore it a little bit. That's why I put styles here for ordered list and for the line item, so we can mess around with them a little bit and just kind of even get used to what the defaults are. So you can see there's a default there, and if you measured it, I don't know, it could be 10 pixels, 20 pixels, something like that. If the other one was 8, this might be double. And what I just want to point out here is if I go into here, and I'm just going to tab over, and I'm going to put, and I'll just do lefts for these because we're just going from the left side. I'm going to do padding left. And remember, padding is kind of, inside the OL element. So we're talking about, and even though this is for OL, but this is just only for OL, this isn't for paragraph as well. And what I'm going to put in here for padding left is I'm going to put in 0 pixels first and just see what happens. I'll put in 0 just to see if I wipe it out, what happens to the padding. And this is for the entire ordered list. Remember, this is the entire list, not each line item, but the entire list. So I'm going to put 0 and just see what happens. And you can see what happens. It actually pushes everything over, and it appears to get rid of the numbers, but it really doesn't. They're actually on the other side there. If you were on a regular page, we would actually see that a little bit, but they're getting cut off, those numbers there right now. So the padding, we can't really make them 0. There's actually a default there. Let me just try putting like 10 in here and doing it. And we still don't even see the numbers yet. Let's try 20. And now we're starting to see the numbers, and since I'm that far, let me try like 40. And I'm going to run it, and that's about where it started. So the default padding of an ordered list is about 40 pixels. So just be aware. And then there's also something over here where the LI items actually have padding. So I could go over here, and I'll put another kind of property in here. I'll do another padding left, and maybe I'll copy this so I don't have to type it, and I'll put it in here for the list items, and I'll just start with 0 and just see what happens. We're just kind of experimenting a little bit, and you can see if I did 0, nothing really happens. And if I do, let's try 10. Okay, so you can see it's moving off a little bit. So 0 does nothing. So the padding is kind of set, so meaning it's kind of set at a certain distance from the number, and you can only increase it, you can't decrease it. So if I put a 20 here, you can see what it's doing. It's kind of putting that padding over. So if you ever had a numbered list or bulleted list and you wanted some distance, you would put a padding left. You would increase the padding left from at least 10 pixels or more. And again, we could use M's and things like that, but for now we're just working with pixels, and you can see what it's doing. So it's kind of increasing from that 0 size. Now, one other thing that I wanted to show you is that they do have another property that they use. Let's just say, for example, I put this back down to 0. And I run it, and you see it gets close. Well, if you want it any closer, they have something called text indent, text-indent, and you could put an amount in there, and I'll just put 0px for now, just to see what happens. And I'll run it, and nothing really happens. But let's put I'll put a positive number, and you can see it pushes it away, but it doesn't actually move that one away. How about a negative number? I'll put a negative 10 in here. So if you ever wanted to get it closer, see it starts to move it over a little bit. And even if I did negative 20, it's doing that. Now it's only doing it for the first line. It's not doing it for the second line because there's a line break there. So, but just be aware that, if you didn't have that, it does have some ability to go forward and backwards on that. Now I wouldn't really mess with it on here, and that they do have something called text indent, and they use something called initial, where if I ran this, it kind of keeps them all lined up. So whatever you do the padding, you know, if you do 20, and it keeps them all together. Now it kind of did that without it, I think. Let's put it back and see what happens. And it was doing that without it. So whatever I put for the distance here, I can kind of put it away. I can make it go further away. I'll put it back to just like 10 from now, which is just a little bit over what it had by default. And remember, if you ever want to space out these, instead of doing line spacing, you can also do something called padding bottom. And we'll try that and just do we'll do 10 pixels since that's what we have on the first one. And now if I run that, you can see what it does. It puts padding to the bottom of each LI, because remember, we're targeting the LI right now. So that helps you customize a list a little bit. So I just wanted to show you a couple things. Not a whole lot to do. That's all I want you to do right now. And actually, we should probably move this paragraph away as well. So I would need another one to move that away. And I'll put just the P here. And I'll put my 2 curly braces. And I'll tab in, and I'll just do like a margin left, and for the P I'll do this. So I'll move it in whatever the other ones are. The other ones, it looks like, you remember they were saying 40 pixels, but it's not. It's because it's a number. So let me try 20 pix right now. Then I have OX, so let me put 20 pixel in there, and there it goes. See, it's moving over just a little bit. I'll kind of move it back just a little. I'm just doing it by eye right now. And it might even be a little less than that. Might even be like 14 when I look at it. Again, I'm just trying to line up these numbers right here. That's all I want you to do right now. So I just want you to get familiar with kind of the way these lists work, just so you have some control over them, because you have to know that the whole list itself kind of can work with padding, and it starts with a 40 pixel by default, and you can kind of adjust it from there. That's where it kind of goes from the edge. And then the LIs, you can actually move the padding over. That moves it over from the number and to where the text starts and increases the distance in here. So just want you to be familiar with that. So all you have to do is just have it basically look like this. Just use some of the, even if they're a little different, that's okay. I just want you to experiment a little bit just to get familiar with doing the background color of the HTML, taking away the margin from the body, and just kind of doing some things here with the ordered list and with the list items, just so we can do these, because we're going to do a little bit on our exercise. Just wanted you to kind of play around in the sandbox a little bit. When you're done here, again, you could do the same thing. After you've finished, you could just save this thing. If you want to save this thing, save your code. If you get this URL, you can basically just click on it, and then you can basically copy this. And then you could come to My Warren and go to the coursework section, and you could scroll down and find that exercise. This is the CSS Intro2-Lists. If you click on here, this way you can put the URL right inside the assignment, and that might be easier to find rather than emailing it. And the way to do that is, if you come to this assignment, you're not going to upload anything, you can just add a comment. And if you click on Add a Comment, you're going to insert the link. You could just paste the link here, but it's better if you actually use the hyperlink and click on that button, and then just paste the URL that you just got from W3 Schools, paste it in here, and then even the text to display, you could even change that and just call it CSS Intro2-Lists. That'll just look better than the URL, the long URL that's there. And then make sure you change the target to new window so that when I click on it, it opens a new window. So I'll hit OK, and I'll hit save, and that's what it'll look like. I'll hit save. And then when I come to this assignment, instead of having to go through emails or anything, I could go to this assignment, and I could go right to your comment, and if I click on that, I'll click there, and it'll take me right to W3 Schools, and I'll run it, and I'll see exactly what you did there. So that's probably the easiest way to send me your URLs. We're going to try to put them through comments rather than emailing them or any other way. So we're going to try to do that. So that should finish up this assignment.